We are going to pivot and maybe take a dramatic turn towards the world of racing and go ahead and invite Michael Gethers to the stage. Michael is going to be presenting a talk all about the world of sports data, so a pivot away from our world of data visualization. And he's a data scientist and data visualization designer currently based in Indianapolis, Indiana. After working for nearly 10 years as a data scientist in tech and cybersecurity, he now leads data strategy for McLaren Racing's IndyCar team, Arrow McLaren, where he is working to transform the way the team stores, analyzes, presents, and understands the large volume of data that is produced every time one of its cars is on the track. Michael studied statistics at UC Berkeley before working at Mercer and Salesforce in San Francisco, Human Security in London, and now McLaren in Indianapolis. And so with that, I'll hand the stage over to Michael.
Hello, can you hear me all right? Cool. Yeah, so I will not introduce myself. I appreciate that.
Stay really close to the mic.
Really close to the mic.
Virtual folks appreciate that.
Okay, will do. So yeah, like Amanda said, I lead the data strategy org at McLaren Racing's IndyCar team, where we're really trying to kind of transform the way the team stores, analyzes, and presents the data that our cars produce every time they are on track. So I will start with a bit of context here. For those of you that aren't familiar with auto racing, aren't familiar with McLaren, McLaren's a very large racing team. We run in a number of different series around the world, including IndyCar, which is what, oh man, I gotta get used to this, flipping two screens at once, so sorry about that. Including IndyCar. So IndyCar is the series that I work in. Many of you might be familiar with Formula One. You may be unfamiliar with IndyCar, but you may have heard of the Indianapolis 500, which is our biggest race of every year. We actually just ran this a couple of weeks ago. We finished second place in what was a bit of a heartbreaker, but it's really no coincidence that I have found myself working on the IndyCar team because I actually grew up going to the Indy 500 with my dad every year since, from a very young age. And in fact, to date, I've been to 23 Indy 500s, and I actually came with the photos to prove it. So this is me as a 5-year-old in 1996 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I think if you would have asked me then, I probably would have told you that when I grew up, I wanted to be a race car driver. Then fast forward some number of years later, this is around when I was in college with my family at the track, and I think if you had asked me then, I would have probably given up the aspiration to become a race car driver, but I would have said that I wanted to do something very similar to what I'm doing right now. And then this is just last year, and I think if you would have asked me then, I probably would have said that I wasn't entirely sure what I had gotten myself into. And the reason why is that, as it turns out, in motorsport, the technology has far outpaced the tooling. And the technology that we have is very impressive. We collect massive amounts of data every time our cars are on track. We have hundreds of sensors on every car, each sampling at close to 1,000 hertz. We're recording timing data, understanding where all cars are on track at every given point in time. We have weather data and track temperature data, car setup data, but all of this exists within an industry and an organization that really has no tradition of robust data infrastructure or data visualization. So a lot of our data is not stored in queryable databases, and it's not searchable. They're just stored in individual log files on a server somewhere. And a lot of our analysis and visualization is done in very large Excel spreadsheets, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, are sometimes very cumbersome and slow to calculate and prone to errors. And a lot of this leads to ineffective communication because we have very highly technical people on the team, but we have no real common way of disseminating all of that information team-wide. And so, that got me thinking that, yes, motorsport is a niche industry and it is a niche domain, but I do not think that this is in any way a niche problem. So if we go back to the previous slide, and we just remove the top bit about what data we're working with, I actually think that these problems are incredibly common, and I've seen these elsewhere in my career, and I think the only difference now is that I have free reign to try to solve them, or at least I feel like I have free reign to try to solve them. So this has represented a pretty unique opportunity, as I see it, to try to build something new, truly from the ground up. And to me, this has felt like really fertile ground and ripe for the theme of this conference, which is positive disruption. So, what have we done? First of all, we've started by viewing data infrastructure as entirely foundational to what we do. And that means creating new queryable SQL databases and a lot of robust data modeling. And this is totally fundamental to what we're trying to do. We want to bring faster insights and better research capability to the broader team. But as this is a data visualization conference, I'm actually not going to spend a ton of time talking about that. I'm going to talk about this, which is the new sort of brand new intuitive front end that we've designed. So we've made an easily navigable website to serve as the team's central hub for all things data analysis. And within this site, we're developing fully bespoke visualizations and tools using D3 primarily. So users are able to view both historical data and current data all in the same place, and the site actually populates live while cars are on track. And it's been an interesting thing because in a lot of ways, this has been a departure for me from my past experience with data viz. So in the past, I've generally known the story I'm trying to tell at the outset, and I've been able to design visualizations to guide people toward a particular insight or conclusion. But we're in a place now where we don't really know the story that's going to emerge in any given event, but we need to build tools that are versatile enough to present those insights quickly and with as little friction as possible. So, I'm happy with where we've gotten to at this point, but it has not been a process without growing pains, and ultimately that's what I'm here to talk about. So I joined the team as a motorsports outsider, really trying to dramatically change the way the team interacted with its data. And that was met, I think, with a pretty healthy skepticism. I was an unknown quantity, and I showed up with my laptop and Matplotlib and Figma, and I started creating plots, which to me might have been aesthetically pleasing, but they didn't really move the needle in terms of on-track performance. And fundamentally, that is my job. As with every other engineer on the team, we're here to move our cars to the front of the grid, plain and simple. And that really didn't happen overnight, and it's been a process of iteration and slow gains. And I want to talk about some of the lessons that we've learned through that process. So, lesson one. I mentioned before information silos, a lot of people sort of not having a way to disseminate information across the team. And I think, as most people here probably know, data visualization, perhaps more than almost anything else, really can bring people out of their information silos, but you need to meet people where they're at. And I've heard a lot of talks like this, and I've read a lot of LinkedIn posts that say, know your audience, know your audience. Enough that it's become something of kind of an annoying cliche, I would say. But tired advice it may be, I do think it is a truly fundamental first step. So I will show you an example. This is an example of one of our timing and scoring reports. This is where we were at. So this is a timing and scoring report. We send these out after every session that our car is on track. And it's a session being, a race, a practice, a qualifying session, something like that. And they're really meant to show us in which sectors on track were fast and in which were slow. And you can try to make of this what you will. You can see the little track map up top with different colored segments, which correspond to the tables below. You can see segment 1 is red, segment 2 is green, etc. And there's actually quite a lot of information here. We can see where we rank, or where our cars rank in each sector. We can see how we compare to any other driver on track that we want, if you're willing to put in the effort. But I don't know about any of you, but this kind of thing gives me a massive headache. And, you have to keep looking back and forth from the track map to the tables below, and in order to glean anything from it, you really have to focus. You have to read numbers, and it's just, you get nothing quickly. So this was one of my first tasks when I joined the team. I was like, all right, I'm going to change this. I'm going to make something way better, right? So I created these. This was one of my early passes. I created one of these rain cloud plots, and this is a report for a single. We've got some contrast issues, but I think you can make out what it looks like. We've got one for every driver, especially one of our drivers. This is Pato Award. He's one of our drivers. Anytime you see OWA, that's in reference to him. So I created rain cloud plots, one for each sector, and I put a little track map next to every one of them that highlighted the sector that I was talking about. So, I eliminated this problem of having to, your eye follow up and down and up and down and up and down over and over again. And, I showed the driver's sector time distributions against a background of sort of all of the other cars on track at a given time. And I thought, wow, this is great. Not only have I made it more pretty, but I've put more information in here, right? I have enabled people to see multiple sector times instead of just one. So I gave myself a pat on the back, and I thought, great, that's one problem solved. On to the next thing. But in reality, this was a big miss for me and for everybody, as proud of it as I initially was. And for a number of reasons. First of all, it really fails to illustrate the deltas between drivers. This gives you distributional differences between a foreground and a background, but that's not what the original report was trying to do, right? So I was not meeting people where they were and with what they were actually trying to get out of that initial report. And the viewer is left to approximate actual sector times. So I know it's a little hard to see, it's fairly small, but my initial challenge was going to be, can you tell me what Pato Award's fastest sector 1 time was? And spoiler alert, the answer is no, you can't. You can maybe see that it's in a ballpark of 8.96 seconds, but that's about it. And our engineers need much higher fidelity information than that. So our previous report was able to show people sector times to the 1,000th or 10,000th of a second. This can't get anywhere close to that. Then, I made a sort of editorial decision to say, I'm going to add distributions here because that's what I think is important. But that's not what the original report was trying to show. Does the viewer actually care about the distributions? Maybe, maybe not. In this case, they didn't. And then lastly, the thing that the report was actually very good at, which was telling us where we ranked in any given sector. And you can't tell that at all here. Maybe you can tell if we're first or second or something in any given sector, but even at that, you can't tell very well because fundamentally, that's not what it was designed to do. And therefore, this visualization is kind of a failure, in my view. So what we did was this. We created an interactive version of that initial timing and scoring report, and it enables a user to select the sector that they want to see. So it kind of eliminates the problem of having the eye track up and down all the time. And it also adds this functionality where you can select multiple sectors at once. So not only did we meet people where they were, but we added some additional capability. And then we added other cool things like, there's a heat map functionality, which I think will show up here in a second. So you can see not just where we rank, but maybe you have some visual cue as to, are we close? If we're second, are we close to first? Are we not? You can tell that fairly quickly. And there are other things where you can change the metrics and select different drivers that you want to reference against. All of this to me was meeting people where they were and building up bigger and better from there. So once we had that, I felt empowered to do the next thing, which was another visualization, kind of in the same ballpark, but this is trying to tell us, very quickly, are we good or are we bad? And if we're good, where are we good? And if we're bad, where are we bad? Are we fast in the straights? Are we fast in the corners? Where are we, what do we need to work on? And what this did, this moved the needle, I think, more than anything for us so far, was it gave people this very quick hit insight. As soon as the session is done, or even live in session, they can go on our site and they can see where our problem areas are. They can see where the fastest cars in a given session are fast, so maybe where it's important to be fast, and things like that. And if they want to dive into more detail and actually see the numbers themselves, they have the interactive timing and scoring report, which we have already given them. So once we met them where they were, we really could start to build bigger and better. And I think that was, that was a big learning point for me. So that was lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is it's much shorter than lesson number 1. And actually, I'm going to pause for effect for a moment. All right, thank you. Lesson 2 is finding the balance between adding features and trying to do too much. Both of those previous apps were fairly fully featured, I would say. But additional features and interactivity can be very powerful. They can also be very confusing. And so one of the things that I've taken away from the past couple of years of doing this is, if a feature isn't making the data easier to understand, I think you can safely assume that it's making it harder to understand. So, we've had people get so distracted by additional features in the apps we've been trying to build that they don't want to use them at all. And that's a big problem. So you really need to strip down to, understand what your question is and answer it, and don't try to do much else. Create another visualization or app if that's what you need to do. So as I said, it was a fairly quick one. We'll move on to lesson number 3. And this is a fun one for me, which is watch people use your tool and notice the difference between power users and casual users. And I think you'll be surprised at how some people use the tools that you're building, because some things that you thought were obvious maybe aren't. So it's really fun to watch power users use the tool because, they'll be clicking around usually very quickly, and they'll try every option, and they'll be hovering, and they'll be control clicking, and they'll be looking for all of the little Easter eggs that you may or may not have hidden within your application. And then they ask tons of questions about how to do things, and they often have suggestions about how to make things better. And as the designer of these tools, this is very rewarding, right? These are the kinds of people that you want to work with because it feels like your work has been appreciated, right? But in reality, that is not the way everybody uses the tools. So I've had people use the tools, and I've watched them use the tools like this, where they never change a single default selection or parameter, and they just use the hover functionality to see what they're trying to see. And as frustrating as that may be sometimes, because you've put hours and days and weeks into building a bunch of fully featured things that you're like, no, I can get a lot more out of this. The reality is neither of these methods is any more correct than the other, and you need to design for both of these users, right? Both of these users are trying to get out of your tool the same kind of information. They just have different ways of doing it. And so if you just design for power users, you're going to be failing these users. And so you need to design for both. So lesson number 4, maybe not as exciting of a lesson, but set key performance indicators. And that can seem obvious, but because it's not always a fun one, I think it can be easily overlooked. They don't need to be fancy, but you just need to be thoughtful in setting them and be diligent in measuring them. So for example, one of our early KPIs was the number of feature requests that we received with the applications. And at first glance, that would kind of seem like an indicator that we're not meeting people's needs, but for us, it was actually a clear sign of adoption. So if the team wasn't using our tools or they didn't see any value in them, then they're not going to be requesting features. So the more feature requests we got, the more people were interested in the tools. And to that was a big indicator. And like I said, it doesn't need to be fancy, but it was something that was meaningful to us and easily measurable, and we continue to measure that right now. So that takes me to the final lesson here, which is perhaps the most important one, which is identify your key stakeholders and get them on board first. Because getting buy-in is hard, especially when you're trying to bring something new and disruptive to an organization or industry with well-worn patterns of behavior. So I like to ask myself these 3 questions, and I ask them early and I ask them often. Who are your power users and key influencers going to be? How do they currently answer the questions that your product is trying to answer, if they're able to answer them at all? And what would keep them from using your product? And if you can answer these questions, you can start to foresee the hurdles to adoption that you might get with the broader team. And so my recommendation is to get these key influencers invested early, have them on board as partners, and respect their expertise, because they generally know what they're talking about. And if you can get them invested themselves, then they will help you do the work of getting others on board. I'm sure this was my experience right out the gate here. I'm sure many of us have had the experience where you put a ton of time and effort into building something, and then you put it out into the world, and you don't get a lot of feedback. You're not really sure if anybody's using it. You don't see anybody using it, and you're just kind of like, that was just sent into the ether, and I'm not sure if it was worth the time at all. This is a way of ensuring that it will be worth the time and effort, because these people will help evangelize your work. And that's been game-changing for me personally, getting adoption. So an interesting thing is starting to happen, which is, through all of the ups and downs here, what's happened is engineers from other disciplines within the team are wanting to have their work shown within the platform. So we have aerodynamics engineers, and we have tire engineers and performance engineers, all recognizing the power of thoughtful design and data visualization, and they see how much more impactful their work can be if it's well presented and easy to find and interpret. And to me, that feels like a very big win. It's still early days for us in building out this product, but we've really started to find our stride, and we're only gaining momentum. So, it's my hope that it's only a matter of time before we can all look at these tools and the tools that we're building together and point to them as one reason among many that we have found our way to victory lane. So that is all I have for you. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity here.
All right. Have a seat, Michael. So I love your framing of this whole thing as really, you keep calling it a product, like an analytical product. And I think a lot of us would look at this and say, this is a lot of the same functional purposes as a dashboard. But when I hear dashboard and I hear analytical product, I think of different things and different design approaches. So is that a deliberate language choice for you?
Now we work now? Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a deliberate choice. If not initially a conscious one. I'm not sure that it was initially a conscious one. It was just, I agree with you that when I think about what I'm trying to build, it doesn't track with the traditional dashboard idea, which for better or for worse, I think has gotten, I think a lot of people are tired of too many dashboards, right? And so for us, we had a very specific purpose, and each one of these applications that you see is designed to do a very simple thing, and they're kind of laid out differently than a traditional dashboard is. And maybe, I don't know, conscious or not, I think it was a way to, separate ourselves from the tired dashboard thing.
Kind of hilarious for the racing team to not use dashboard, but
Yeah.
All right, we have a lot of great questions. Let's go ahead and we'll popcorn between the two sides. Rodrigo, why don't you kick us off?
Yes, hi, thank you very much. It was very good. My question is quick and simple. As a sports fan, or racing fan, how that previous knowledge of the sport helped you to add value, and what were your biggest challenges after entering the game?
Yeah, I would say, it certainly helped me to get in the door, understanding, being a racing fan since I was a young kid. I was actually shocked when I got in the door how different it was to my perception as a fan. Definitely my past experience informs what I do, because as a fan, I was watching for years and years and years, and being an analytical person, and I created a lot of data visualizations myself just for fun before I ever worked with the team. That has definitely informed the way I've approached things. But once you get in the door and you start to understand you as a fan, I never really understood what the gaps actually were, because there were a lot of things that I thought I could add value to that they had covered, and then other things that there were clear gaps. So you really had to come in and assess. But definitely it has informed my my plans. Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah, I was going to make the same dashboard joke, but it was going to intro the question. So like the driver has a dashboard, and that's evolved over time, right? And military also takes the dashboard of like a helicopter very seriously, right? So if things on the engine of a helicopter are pointing up is good, right? So you look at the screen, up, right? The helicopter is good. Now that you're making this visual portal of these new pieces of information that people didn't have before, so the digitization of things, how is what you're consuming and what your competitors are consuming? Are you creating competing data visualizations? Are you seeing what they're seeing? Is there almost like an evolution or a competition of like what you're actually trying to see and understand and make game time decisions that are there? Like, is this the new evolution of like what the driver sees, and now it's what you see supporting the driver?
Yes, I don't think I would be so cocky as to say this is, the evolution of racing and this is the direction that we're going. I do think we are doing something new. As I said, I am a motorsports outsider. I don't know what every other team in the world and in every other series in the world is doing, but I know what our team was doing before, and it was very different from what we're trying to do now. And it's starting to percolate into other facets of the team, right? So it started with just us and our little data analytics group, and then it kind of gets to our race engineers and then our performance engineers, and as I said, it's getting to our tire engineers and aerodynamics engineers, and indeed the drivers. So the drivers have actually made some requests for the apps, which is fun. So I can't really tell you what other teams are looking at. But I do know that we're doing something very new for us, right? And it's very exciting for me to have the opportunity to kind of carve that path at this point. Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's see if we can do rapid fire questions,
Yes,
Michael.
let's do it.
So off to the side, go.
Okay, after this one is rapid fire. No, I'm joking. Rudy from Ireland, thanks for a great presentation, Michael. You can judge by just how many people are standing up for questions. One of the themes emerging so far today has been people willing to bring their own biases into the work they're talking about. So my question is, is it possible for you to do that working with so many experts in the kind of engineering field, and you're kind of building these tools? Are you also coming in with your own kind of ideas and biases about what's causing these, or do you have to rely on the aerodynamics experts, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biases that I enter with are how data should be presented. Interestingly, that I'm here, but these are the world's experts at these kinds of at how to make a race car go fast, and I don't really. I would never sort of push against what they know, because I don't have that knowledge really. Yeah.
And last question to this side, and then we are going to go to break after this, but it is going to be the coffee break, so everyone can catch up on more questions then. Last question.
So my question is around your point on making sure that you design for both the power users and the casual users. Do you have a tried and true approach to that? I've struggled with that because my users kind of run the gamut, and I struggle with designing a tool that would satisfy both.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to go back to what I said in the presentation, but for me, it really, like the light bulb was when I was actually watching somebody who didn't know that I was watching them use it, watching them use the tool, and I was like, wow, I never thought of trying to use it that way, because I do think you enter this process with so many biases and assumptions, and you're so deep within your own application and within the data that you don't really think that somebody might not be the same way. So honestly, the only way for me to do it has been to engage with the users, or prospective users, or, every situation's different. In my situation, I'm very fortunate to actually be sitting next to these people, and I can go over and say, hey, what do you think about this? But I wish I had a checklist that I could give you and I say, for power users do this and make sure you're doing this for casual users. And I don't. I think it is, you just really have to engage with the people that you think might be using your tool. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And that's such an interesting point you raised about people not seeing you actually watching them, which in user testing, I think is not always the luxury we have.
No, another luxury of sitting next to people. Yeah.
So this is going to wrap up our first block of this afternoon. We are going to go to a coffee break from 3:30 until 4. Michael, big round of applause for Michael. Thank you so much.